Hello, all you Cyclone sports enthusiasts out there. I'm Hawn Wong, filling in for Taylor Mankel as he keeps himself busy over at Hilton with the Iowa State men's basketball game. Alongside me today is Ben Olson. Ben, how's it going?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
A little sad to be missing the Cyclone basketball game, but you know what? I always love talking Cyclone sports.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't get to watch it, but we'll talk about that. Also, along with that, we'll talk about women's basketball because, you know, Ben, can you smell that in the air? It's March. It's March tomorrow. February 28th, tomorrow is March 1st, beginning with, you know, what really seems to be the culmination of basketball. You got NBA basketball, but most importantly, college basketball rounding out their season. So why don't we just start along with Cyclone basketball rounding out their season tonight in Hilton, senior night. Monte Morris making his final appearance in Hilton. It's really going to be a fun game for the Cyclone fans and even for all the seniors out there preparing today. But with Iowa State, they've gone on this stretch of 7 games, 6 wins to 1 loss. That one loss being
Texas, I do believe.
Yeah, it was Texas right after the Kansas game. Lost by 2 points, really heartbreaking. But in this 7-game win streak, do you think that it's one of the better streaks that Iowa State's seen this year? Notably beating Kansas at home, beating Baylor, number 9 Baylor, formerly ranked number 1. So how's this stretch of basketball look for you?
Well, when you look at Iowa State's season as a whole, this is undoubtedly the best stretch of basketball that they've been playing. And like you said, March is coming up, and they could not be picking up this stretch at a better time of the year. When I look at their wins over Kansas and Baylor, compared to earlier in the season, they didn't have the ability to consistently close, and maybe late game execution was not there. But when you look at this team now, it is not the same team that we saw at the beginning of the year. They're really starting to make their shots, and I think the biggest part is really all the players are on the team are starting to find their roles. And as far as cooperation and consistency goes for Iowa State basketball, they could not be hitting their stride at a better time.
Yeah, I like how you said Iowa State's really finding the roles, especially here late coming into March. I think it is no coincidence that with the 7-game streak that they're on, being 6-1, Solomon Young has made an impact on both sides of the court, seeing his minutes increase. Since his first start in Oklahoma about a week ago, he's been second on the team in rebounding and first on the defensive end, leading the team in blocks and steals. Talk a little about Solomon Young's impact on the team and really emergence as the center for Iowa State.
So in the show, you know, we were looking, you and I were talking earlier, we wanted to look at how Iowa State found their consistency and who was really the difference maker. So if I looked at it, Solomon Young is my difference maker for this team.
Definitely, yeah.
I saw a stat earlier on Twitter that said when Solomon Young plays at least 15 minutes in the games, Iowa State is 11-0. And if that doesn't speak for how important his impact is, then I don't know what does. Him being able to start and really, even though he's a freshman, going out specifically against Baylor and not showing any fear against those bigs in the Big 12 is really important for this team since we're used to playing small ball.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So if we can continue to get the play that we're getting out of Solomon Young, then I think that a lot of Iowa State's problems can continue to go away.
Oh, yeah, and that really boils down to size. With Solomon Young, you're getting a 6'8" big man who not only has, like I said, the height to grab those rebounds, but he's really strong there in the post. You don't see freshmen that often in the Big 12 that make this kind of impact unless you're like a Kansas who gets those 5-star recruits. But Solomon Young coming in, making the difference this early for Iowa State, it really shines a light on the future that he can bring for Iowa State. But we talked about a difference maker. Let's talk about consistency. Monte Morris, for me, has been Mr. Consistency, not only this year, but in the 4 years he's been at Iowa State. You know, he's scored double-digit points in all but, I think, 4 of the 28 games this season. And when we talk about Monte Morris, we're not even really talking about his scoring ability. We're talking about his passing and his ability to not turn the ball over. We've talked about it countless times on this show and even on Twitter, just talking amongst people who follow Iowa State basketball. We know Monte Morris for his assist-to-turnover prowess. He's been the leader in assist-to-turnover ratio in the NCAA the past 4 years. Iowa State's leader by far in career assist turnovers. And in this last 7 games alone, he's seen 7.6 assists to not even a full turnover per game. And so that just alone shows how Monty Morris has been the consistent figure to be able to let Iowa State, have impact from their other players. So, with Iowa State's hot start, let's talk about another team that they're facing actually currently right now. I think it is in halftime, but Okie State, they are another team in the Big 12 that has been on an absolute tear in the last 11, going 10-1. This game definitely falls for Iowa State in the category of a trap game, with Iowa State having the current number 2 seed in the Big 12. This game alone, losing it, could bring them down to the 3 seed. Give Iowa State the opportunity to meet Kansas in the Big 12 tournament, something we don't want to see. So with this Okie State game here at Hilton tonight, what does Iowa State really need to do to not fall into, the trap?
Well, as sports fans, how lucky can we get that we get to see the 2 hottest Big 12 teams square off right at the end of the season?
Yeah, really when it matters most, too. You're talking about the seeding for Okie State even. I think they're sitting at 5. And with that 5 spot, you're probably going to be matched up against West Virginia, and that'll hurt, too. But, yeah, keep going.
I think you called this a trap game for Iowa State. And for me, when I look at it, it's definitely easy for Iowa State to start thinking about the West Virginia game coming up this Friday, because when you look at it, that is also a very important game that goes towards finding out if Iowa State is going to be a 2 seed in the Big 12 tournament or possibly all the way down to a 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And so I think the biggest key to getting the win against Oklahoma State is Iowa State really needs to see a big night from their seniors, because I'm sure last game in Hilton for them, they are feeling maybe the nerves, nostalgic, but I think if Iowa State can get consistent big numbers from their starters, somewhat like we saw at the beginning of the year, then I think that they will be able to overcome the hotness that this Oklahoma State team has going on right now.
Yeah, and no doubt about that. Iowa State is having a big bump from their starters, notably with Matt Thomas. I think 16 points currently against Okie State on 4 for 5 shooting from deep. And Monty Morris going for a triple-double currently with 8 points and 6 assists. We'll keep you updated on that score throughout the show. But with senior night here at Hilton tonight, let's go ahead and talk through each senior for the team, their impact on this season already. Starting off with Stu Neslick. We haven't seen Stu. He's been injured, but being a senior, we're not going to leave anything out. Have you been a fan of Stu? He's really a homegrown fan here. When Iowa State fans see Stu even get up from the bench, you hear a cheer. Why is that? And
Well, upon my arrival at Iowa State, let me tell you, I looked into joining the Stu Neslick fan club. Unfortunately, I was unable to find it. But this season, or the past few years, Stu has really been important to Iowa State basketball because he's a boost off the bench, and everybody needs a fan favorite, which is something that really, I think, brings the team morale up. So he may not have gotten the minutes and the stats that some of the other seniors have, but you can't leave Stu out on senior night.
No, definitely not. Moving on to 2 transfers for Iowa State, Merrill Holden and Daryl Bovey. So these guys, they've played very similar roles for the Cyclones this year, both starting at centers in multiple games. But with these 2, they haven't really had the spark that Promes wanted to see, which is why we've seen Solomon Young in the lineup in this past 6 games. But with Holden and Bovey, coming into March, we've seen some decent play from Holden specifically. Between the 2 big men for you, do you see any impact from them in March?
I can see a surprise impact from them in March. I think a big part of Iowa State's recent winning streak, specifically their last 5-game win streak, is that it took a while, but Holden and Bowie have finally began to figure out their roles on the team. And we're seeing them make the hustle plays maybe that we didn't see earlier in the year. Like, I think back to the Baylor game where Donovan Jackson hit that big 3 that put Iowa State up 5 when they went on that run. The assist that came from that 3-pointer was Bowie, who could have easily tried to lay it up himself driving down the lane. But I think if we can continue to make those unnoticed plays from Holden and Bowie, then Iowa State will be just fine heading into tournament play.
Yeah, and not only you said that play was unnoticed, but the team, especially Bovey there in that play specifically, he knows where the team's strengths lie. The three-point shooting, especially with Donovan Jackson in the corner. Like we said, this team is figuring things out. The chemistry is getting there. So let's move on to Deontay Burton, Big 12 newcomer for 2016, and really a catalyst for Iowa State's offense in many games this season. Whether he's putting it up from deep or getting to the rack, he's just a monster for Iowa State that looks for any sort of offense outside of what Monte Morris can do. So looking at Deontay Burton, for me, it's really interesting having a guy like Deontay Burton on this team, because looking at the past Iowa State teams for, I guess, my 4 years at Iowa State, I've seen Royce White come through, DeAndre Kane, George Niang, and looking at those three specifically, the thing that comes to mind for me is versatility. You're going to get a lot of action from these guys, not only in the offensive end or the defensive end, but steals, blocks, and they're allowed to play a lot of positions and be all over the court. With Burton at 6'4", he uses his height really well, but really it's his strength, his quickness, and his speed and his width being only 6'4", but 240. He's allowed to muscle in and get to his spots. For you, what has Burton brought to this team this year?
I completely agree with you there. I think Burton is a basketball player unlike any of us have ever seen, and probably unlike any player Coach Prohm has ever had to coach.
Yeah.
And he's done a phenomenal job with that. And really, I think the mismatch problems that Burton has caused for all of Iowa State's opponents over the last 2 years has proved crucial in some of the biggest wins that Iowa State has. Because that is when we get to see good Deontay. You always hear the good Deontay versus bad Deontay Burton. And another part of Iowa State, as they molded this season, is we're starting to see more of a consistent Deontay, which is great for his overall play. And he may not have had his best moments, and he may have had some amazing how did he do that moments, but Iowa State wouldn't have gotten some of the success without Deontay Burton.
Yeah, and like you said, there was a little bit of inconsistency with Deontay Burton in the earlier parts of the season, but I think if Deontay Burton doesn't put up those wild shots that sometimes go in, Iowa State doesn't sit number 2 in the Big 12 where they're at right now. So hats off to Deontay Burton. Good luck senior night. Moving on to the 3,000-point scorers Iowa State currently has on their roster.
Special.
Notably, very special players that come through Iowa State. Matt Thomas, Naz Long, and Monte Morris. Speaking on Matt Thomas and Naz Long, just really off-ball machines for Monte Morris in this offense. Matt Thomas from Wisconsin came to Ames with Monte Morris, so they've really developed a rapport together. And although his shooting percentage hasn't really jumped all that much this year, we saw a big improvement from Matt Thomas from his sophomore year to his junior year, notably in three-point shooting and defense. So, Naz Long for you. He is a redshirt senior this year. Unfortunately, did miss last year due to his hip injuries. But as for this year, he's come back even stronger. What have you seen from Naz Long in terms of his improvement from the previous years? He's talked about himself as a freshman average, I think 1.4 points. He takes that as prideful of himself, knowing that he's come this far. What do you think?
I read an article earlier today about Naz Long seriously considered transferring after his sophomore year, but I can tell you that the decision to stay was one of the best that Cyclone Nation could have received. The influence that he's had as a team leader for this Cyclone team over the past 2 seasons has been, uncomparable. Without his leadership, I feel like Iowa State would not have been able to stay the course like they have over times. And this season specifically, we've noticed that we're starting to see the Nazareth of old, almost like his sophomore, junior season, where he's hitting these ridiculous three-pointers, and that is going to be crucial for Iowa State as we go into March. And I really think that Naz will go down as one of the best team leaders that Iowa State basketball teams have ever experienced.
Oh, without a doubt, Naz Long brings that quality that you don't see, the intangibles. But moving on to kind of the main event for Iowa State, notably in their point guard, Monte Morris. Now, Monte Morris is the Bob Cousy finalist this year, which is given to the best point guard in the nation. Stacking him up against other point guards that are in this category, Kansas's Frank Mason, UCLA's Alonzo Ball, Marquise Fultz out of Washington. These point guards score well and they pass well, but I think personally Monte Morris is the best true point guard of the group. How does he stack up against those point guards and even against the rest of the nation in terms of the Naismith finalists?
I completely agree. If you look at like Frank Mason from Kansas is receiving a lot of the Big 12 Player of the Year talk, which Monte had preseason. And Mason is an incredible scorer mainly, and he can also facilitate. But when you look at Monte and his assist-to-turnover ratio, of course, but also his steals, and his ability to facilitate but really just be a floor general.
Oh, yeah.
When it comes to the Cousy Award, I just feel like there isn't another player in the NCAAs like Monte. And specifically for him, I think he might be missed when we come thinking about next year because, I mean, as Cyclone fans, we've just become so accustomed to no turnovers from our point guard. And it could come as a surprise to us next year. We might have a little frustration, but really we should just be thankful for the incredible play that we've received out of Monte. And we're talking about hanging the jerseys. He's right up in that conversation before he even graduates.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Monte Morris will be one of the best to suit up in Ames when his season and his career finally round up. And speaking on his consistency and those lack of turnovers, Iowa State, I think, has become really accustomed to having those extra possessions late game when Monte Morris doesn't turn over the ball, whereas other point guards even might turn over the ball late game. Monte Morris has shined there. So that is our senior night recap overview of the seniors playing for Iowa State. Looking at the game as a whole, Iowa State is up 40-39 at halftime, whereas the second half should start soon. But this game specifically against OK State, will Iowa State, do you think they'll see them in the Big 12 tournament? Because looking at how the bracket is shaping up so far, right now Iowa State's really primed to face the winner of TCU Oklahoma after the first round because Iowa State will get the bye. How is that between TCU and Oklahoma? Do you think OK State matches up better or TCU for Iowa State?
I would rather see a TCU than Oklahoma State, mainly just because of who's hot and who's not right now. And I think Iowa State did lose their game at TCU earlier in the season, but really I think they handled TCU extremely well when we saw them at Hilton and really figured out how to stop Jalen Fisher and TCU's big man. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name. But I would rather see TCU in a matchup in the Big 12 tournament.
Yeah. And although this is all poised on whether Iowa State wins this game and also their next game against West Virginia. So looking at that West Virginia game next week, I guess this Thursday, it's a dog town down in West Virginia. They corral to the ball like no other team in the nation. So with Iowa State having one of the best point guards in the nation in Monte Morris, how do you think that matchup is going to look and hopefully give Iowa State the second seed?
Going down to Morgantown and having to beat Press Virginia for the number 2 seed in the Big 12 tournament is less than ideal. But Iowa State gives themselves the best shot the way they're playing right now. And, of course, we have Monte and Naz and Matt have really been good lately about hitting their three-pointers especially, but also not turning the ball over and playing good defense, which has been key.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that Iowa State has the best shot that they could. I feel like it is almost impossible to go down to Morgantown late in the season and get a win. So I am worried about this game for the Cyclones.
Okay.
But I would like to see a good win tonight, which could give us a lot of momentum going into Friday.
Yeah, and unfortunately with West Virginia's win over Iowa in their last matchup, West Virginia will have that tiebreaker. So like I said earlier, this game tonight and that West Virginia game are essential to get that 2 seed. So fingers crossed if you're a Cyclone fan out there that Iowa State is 2-0 in these next 2. Moving on to women's basketball really quick before we go. They're also on a little streak of their own, winning the last 6 of 7 games, winning 5 in a row actually. And 2 notable wins out of that in West Virginia, at West Virginia, and Texas, number 6 Texas at Texas. So that's Iowa State's first 5-game win streak since 2000. Who's been playing really good as of late? Iowa State, they've had consistency with their guards all season, but as of late, I think Shauna Johnson and Jada Buckley have really shined. You?
I completely agree. I mean, we're over in basketball heaven here at Iowa State right now. And what a better time than be heading into the postseason. But if you look at Iowa State's big wins, they picked up their first road win over a top 6 team in program history for women's basketball. And I think Shauna Johnson specifically has had a big role in that. She's a senior and she's starting to wind down her career, and I think it is incredible the way she's stepping up. Of course, had a double-double last night, and she's going to be crucial for the women in the Big 12 tournament.
Oh, of course, and notably on Shauna Johnson, also Jada Buckley. She is a player who's really versatile in how she's able to impact a game. She does primarily handle the ball, but she really doesn't get as many assists as you'd like her to. But with Jada Buckley, her ability to get to the free throw line is really what I want to highlight here. Shauna Johnson, although she's a guard, she does really well down in the low post, so she's able to occupy a lot of space down there. What Jada Buckley is able to do for the Cyclones is really just get to the free throw line by driving the ball, if not kicking it, trying to go up for the layup, and hopefully getting the line. But with Iowa State, the bracket for the Big 12 tournament is already up, and they're opening up the tournament with K-State. The 4 seed and the 5 seed here in the Big 12. They split their series this year, so with each winning their home games, where does this game take you? It's going to be in Oklahoma City, neutral court, so we don't really have to worry too much about, I guess, home team advantage. But what do you think Fenley does after losing, I think, his last matchup by 12 against K-State?
This one for me is going to come down to the defensive end of the court. I really think we need to see the Cyclone women grind it out and start getting some boards. I feel like also, though, if they can use their defense to get in transition, that's going to be a big part for the women. That'll, of course, free up Jada Buckley to get some easy layups and, of course, get to the free throw line. As long as they continue to get solid play from the senior leaders on this Cyclone women's team, I think they have a promising postseason ahead. Of course, with their recent big wins over top-ranked programs, they are becoming more of a solid pick for the NCAA tournament, which is good to see. And a strong performance by the Cyclone women, especially on the defensive end, in the Big 12 tournament will only make them feel more secure.
Oh, without a doubt, their defense has been pretty stellar in this 5-game win streak. But on the offensive end, with looking at their last matchup against K-State, Emily Durr, Shauna Johnson, Bridget Carlton, they all struggled from the field a little bit. So I just think Bill Fenley will have to will his team to be aggressive on the shot and to really look for all the openings against K-State. Down in Oklahoma City, March 4th is when that game will be, to open up Iowa State's postseason run. So that's all we have for Iowa State basketball and Iowa State sports tonight on Cyclone InCYders. Thank you, Ben Olson, for joining me on the show. I'm Hawn Wong. Make sure to catch Cyclone basketball on Thursday against West Virginia, hopefully to secure that 2 seed in the Big 12 tournament. And also women's basketball on March 4th in Oklahoma City. That game will be on ESPN2. Thank you very much and have a great night.